How do you be hospitable during Corona? Welcome back, everybody. We're working our way through Romans 12, more or less verse by verse. And but I wanted to take a moment before we get into verse 13 to review a little bit of what we've talked about so far. You know, Paul is using chapter 12 in Romans as a pivot point, as we've talked about. He spent chapters 1 through 11 explaining kind of the why of Christianity, like what Jesus did for us and why he did it, and the impact that it has in our lives. But then he kind of pivots in verse 12 or in chapter 12 and starts talking about what we're supposed to do about all of that stuff. And I think there's a lot of different ways to read chapter 12. It's like what I'm laying out here is not the only way to see it, okay, at all. Okay, there's lots of different ways to look at it. But what's really jumping off the page for me in this Corona time is the way that he's laying out some building blocks of like kind of character qualities that each individual person should have in order to come together into a unified group. You know, the Romans had a lot in common with us today, okay? There were lots of different groups of people that really did not get along, okay? And they didn't get along for a lot of different reasons. They had different religions, they had different amounts of money, they had different power structures, like within the world that they lived in. And without Jesus, there was no reason for these people to be together. But even with Jesus, they were still having a hard time getting along. And this maybe feels a little bit like today. So I think that this is a really helpful thing for us to kind of work our way through. You know, so far, the building blocks that Paul has put into place is that we need to be sacrificial with one another. We need to be holy. We need to be humble. We need to be dependent on one another. We need to make sure that our love is sincere for one another, okay? And that we need to be devoted to one another. And then finally, we realize that keeping our zeal and our spiritual fervor is not only helpful for us, but is also helpful for the people around us as well. So those are the blocks that we've put into place so far, but the truth is that there's a lot more to come. So let's dig into verse 13 now. It says, share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. So this first part, okay, it says share with the Lord's people who are in need. The first people that come to mind when I think of sharing in general, okay, are Steve and Julie Hall. They're members of our church here in Southwest Florida, and they lead our outreach. They work with our Hope chapter, and they do an incredible job of serving. They're incredibly, incredibly consistent in meeting people's needs in our community. But if you look really closely at this verse, though, it says something a little bit interesting here. It says, share with the Lord's people who are in need. Okay? Now, if we think about that phrase in the context of everything that we've talked about so far, about like the idea of bringing the believers together, right? What this verse is asking us to do is to think very specifically about the members in our church who might be in need. And so what I want you to do is think really hard about the relationships that you have within our body of believers, okay, in your family group, whatever it may be. And I want you to think about how those people might be doing in the context of Corona, and consider whether or not you have done everything you can to help meet their needs. Now, those needs might be physical. Maybe if they've lost a job, or they're on a fixed income, or whatever it may be, there may just be really practical needs that they can't see past to even get to the spiritual needs, right? But there may also be spiritual or emotional needs that are going unmet in isolation, in just the loneliness of these times. And so take a pause, if you will, and think about what you can do today to make sure that the needs within among the Lord's people are met as best as you can, as much as it depends on you. Okay, so this last part, it says 2 words, really complicated, right? Practice hospitality. And the truth is, I sat here and I thought about this for quite some time. I can't think of what to share with you guys on this, but I know that there's a lot of really spiritual people who are probably watching this right now who have some great ideas for how we can be hospitable in a time where we need to be distant or separated to some degree or another. And so what I want you to do is put that in the comments. Okay, you might be watching on Facebook, you might be watching on YouTube, but go ahead and put in the comments for this video ways in which you think that you can be hospitable in a time where you have to be separate. Okay, it's a tough challenge, but I think that collectively we're going to be able to come up with something really good. So love you guys. Looking forward to the next video together.